Hello, in this video I'm going to do a more detailed tutorial for simple traffic system. We're going to configure multiple road sections on this network so that we can pretty much go through the updated workflow and see some of the recent tools that have been added. So this is version 1.0.6 and let's just go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'll do is I'll add an AI traffic controller to the scene. This is required for every scene. You only need one. It's basically what controls all of the traffic car logic. And we don't need to make any changes to this by default. The next thing we'll do is add an AI waypoint route to the scene. So with that, I will hold down Alt and left click in the scene view on top of a collider, which is the road that I'm clicking right now. And that's going to spawn waypoints where I click. Pretty simple. Now I'll use hotkeys to do this. So I'll press Control Alt R to spawn the next route, and there we go. So now I have 2 lanes set up on that side of the road, and yeah, that's the manual workflow. You can also Control D and duplicate these routes, and then you can just like move them down if you have parallel lanes. If you're using a manual workflow, and this will allow you to quickly set those up, then you could select reverse waypoints, and now all of the routes are set up. So that's the manual way to set up a road section. So now we'll look at one of the new tools that was added recently. So we will select the route creator this time. And for this object, it pretty much works the same way as spawning the waypoint route, except this is a spline and it's going to procedurally generate the waypoint routes for us and their waypoints. So I will hold down Alt and left click in the center of this road section, which is basically right between these 2 double yellow lines. And this spline tool greatly improves and reduces the amount of work that's required to configure a route waypoint system. So in the time we're spending to create this spline, it would take us about the same amount of time to create one route lane, but we're going to create multiple. And since it's procedural, we don't have to actually do as much work to get everything in place. So at the end of each section of the spline, so at the start and at the end, we have these red spheres, which are the control points. So you can see by moving this, it adjusts the curvature between some of the points. And let's go ahead and just set up the endpoints so that that curvature is not there. Okay. The next thing we will do is select the number of routes we want to create. We want 4 because this road section has 4. And let's hit refresh. We see that we have 4 routes generated. They're all currently down the center of the spline. So what we'll do here is go back to the route creator, and we'll set an offset value on the x-axis for these waypoints, or for these waypoint routes. So I know that the outer routes should be 8 meters away from the center, and the inner routes should be 3 meters away. So I'm just going to plug in those values, hit refresh, and now we can see that we have our routes dynamically generated. And because I'm going to reuse this tool, I will set the default offsets for the first 4 lanes, which will just save me time from having to plug these in for the next section of road that I do. Okay, so there we go. And what we need to still do for this section is add some more waypoints. So here we'll adjust the waypoint frequency, which basically sets the distance between waypoints. And we're going to change this to, let's do 0.035. I know that this is a value I like for this section of the road because I've done it a few times already. So I'll plug that in and select refresh. And now we can see we have more evenly spaced waypoints along the route. Pretty cool, pretty quick. And if we want to adjust where these points are, we'll just move the final points, hit refresh, and there we go. So we'll basically adjust the start and the end to have the points be where we want them to be. And just a little bit more. There we go, that's good enough for now. Okay, so on these upper routes, we're going to, or actually on the lower routes, we need to reverse the waypoints so the traffic goes in the proper direction. And that's pretty much it. So now we learned the manual workflow for this short section, and we learned a more dynamic, automatic workflow to create multiple lanes for this longer section. Let's go ahead and tidy up the scene a little bit. Let's create an empty object, reset it, and we'll just call this road lanes. And I will add all of the routes that we just created to that road lanes object. And select the route creator again. And at this point, I will wait for it to load. Now that it's loaded in the editor, I will select Start New. And we could see that those routes, or that spline is no longer there. And if we expand the route creator, we can see all we have are the start and end control points. So there's no spline points on that route creator anymore. And what was created was 4 new routes. So let's go ahead and repeat that process for this section of road. And hold down Alt and left click. And here, because we already have sections, it's generating the splines based on the section settings. So if I don't want it to do that because it's bothering me or something, I can adjust those settings so that the density of these objects is not so much. Or I could just spawn a brand new AI traffic waypoint route creator. But I'll just continue working with it at this point. By the time we get to the end of this section, it'll look okay. And you could pay a little bit more attention to where you're placing these spline points so you could have a more accurate layout. I'm just trying to get through this process quickly and really just demonstrate an efficient workflow so that everyone can create traffic in their own projects. All right, so this is starting to come together pretty quickly. And that's good enough for right now. And once you're done, like procedurally generating these routes, if there's some fine details that you want to adjust, just finalize this and manually make those details if you're having a hard time using the tool to procedurally get the result you're looking for. But this seems good enough for me, so I'm happy with that. I will go ahead and click Start New, and I will take those 4 routes, drop them into my road lanes, and I will reverse the waypoints for those 2. At this point, I'll go ahead and I'll save the scene. I've done a decent amount of work. I have a good section of this road set up. And let's go ahead and take a look at how we can actually let's set up 2 more road segments. So we'll set up this one right here, just so we can get these intersections working and see what it looks like. So I'll go back to my route creator. And generate some points for this section. This section does have way more points than it needs, so I'll go up to 0.1 and see what that looks like. Maybe 0.085. Adjust the control point a little bit. Okay, there we go. So at this point, I'm not going to create any more 4-lane sections. So I will go ahead and grab these routes really quick, just drop them in there. Let me reverse these waypoints. Okay, I'm all set. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Go ahead and I'll save the scene. So I want to set up one more 2-lane route on this short road. Go ahead and I'll do that really quick. I'll start anew. This time I don't need 4 lanes, I only need 2 lanes. So I'll hit refresh. We can see that it drops those 2 procedural routes down to 2. And I'm not going to go through this entire road section, I'll just start it here. So I think that we've pretty much learned how to create routes with multiple lanes manually and procedurally. I think that doing more of this is not really necessary at this point. I think what we'll move on to next is setting up the intersections. All right, and let's grab those control points and bring them to the front and back so they line up properly. I will adjust these route offsets. So I'll try 3 and -3. I think I'm going to need to change them a little bit. They look like they're, for the most part, okay, but 3 might be a little too much, so I'll do like 2.8, -2.8, hit refresh, a little closer to the center. That I like that a little bit better. Let's adjust the frequency, so we'll lower it to 0.05, hit refresh, and that's good enough. Yeah, that's good enough. And the end of the route is at a good point. Yeah, I feel like that's good. So I'll go ahead and I'll save the scene. At this point, I don't need the route creator in the scene anymore. I've used it to build my routes. I'm just going to delete it. Save the scene again. So now I have a scene with all my lanes set up that I'm going to use for this demo. And basically at this point I just want to hook up some traffic to it. So, but before I spawn the traffic on these routes, I guess I should spawn the traffic to just show you how it works. And in general, you will select the routes. And each of these routes has a spawn traffic vehicles array. You just drop some vehicle prefabs in here. I'm going to use the random car. This random car has a random material that will be assigned to it, and it has a random speed that it'll use. There's a min speed and a max speed, so all of these cars will get a random speed between 15 and 35 miles per hour. So I've added the random car prefab as a spawn vehicle to each of these routes. Now if I press play, each of the routes, the first point on the route will have that vehicle spawn to it, and it's going to drive to the end of the route, because that's basically what the cars are programmed to do by default. If there's no route connections, they won't drive any farther. So everything's working as it should. If we want more cars on the routes, we can increase this amount. So we can, let's say, spawn 5 cars on each route. Now there's going to be a little bit of distance between, so the shorter routes, they only have 4 because there wasn't enough space to spawn more cars. Now we have traffic on the routes, and it's working. So what I notice with this setup is that all of the cars, let's turn off the gizmos so we could see them a little easier, they're all evenly spawned, and it looks very fake. So what we want to do to kind of randomize the spawning a little bit is we want to set up some custom spawn points on these routes. Let's go ahead and save the scene. And for this we'll use the spawn points window. It's just a simple tool, simple editor window. We'll add it to our Unity doc. And with this we just select load routes. And what that does is it draws an S editor handle button in the scene view above each waypoint. And what this does is it allows us to click on these buttons. So let's say I want this to be a spawn point for a car. There we go, boom. And we want to just like click buttons and create random spawn points that are not in like an easily recognizable pattern. So we'll just go through the lanes, add some spawn points around. And now let's say you've adjusted your spawn points a little bit manually and they're not facing the right direction. So I think this route, because it's parallel, it's going to be okay. But actually it's not. So we can see that when this spawn point was placed, it didn't have the proper orientation. So what we can do, there's an align route points button in this editor window that will align all of the waypoint routes, or we can manually select that individual waypoint route, and we can select align waypoints on that route, and that will update it appropriately. So if you have a lot of routes in the scene and you've started to do some custom work, you might not want to align all route waypoints. I personally always align all of them. I haven't had a custom need to where they need to be aligned in a different way, but maybe you have a different use case. So I'll just demonstrate that really quickly by spawning a few more points randomly. I'll just align all of the route waypoints, and we can see that that just quickly updates everything. All right, so spawning some more points on this section. So the reason this spawn point tool was set up was so that we don't have to actually click through our hierarchy, and we can get a lot of efficiency through this process by just being able to visually click on the spawn point where we want cars to spawn. And yeah, it just saves a lot of time. So any of these tools that you see me using, if you have any feedback for them, I'd definitely be open to it. They were really just developed for me to be able to do these tasks quickly, and they kind of just do what they do. So if you think that it should do something a little differently, or that it should do more than what it does, it just might be something that I haven't thought of yet, and that I didn't require for my specific use case. Okay, so now we have spawn points on all of our routes. Let's go ahead and collapse the hierarchy so we can see things again. I don't need to use the spawn point window anymore because I'm done with it, so I will unload the routes and close the tab. I will go ahead and save the scene because I just did another round of work. And now let's tell the cars to actually use these spawn points. If we don't tell the cars to use them, they won't. So we will select all of our road lanes that have spawn points on them, and we will select the option use spawn points. Now if I press play, we'll see that they spawn in a more random pattern. They're more spread out, and they're only going to spawn as many as you have spawn points for. So these short lanes only had a few spawn points, which is why only a few cars spawned. But this helps randomize your car pattern, and yeah, I think it's great. So there we go. Another progression step. Let's go ahead and save the scene. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to interconnect the routes here and set up some traffic lights. The first thing I will do is interconnect the routes. So again, we have another editor tool that will make it so you don't have to fish through your hierarchy to manually assign these. So you would select Tools, Simple Traffic System, Route Connector Window. Same deal, we'll just dock this. These windows do exactly what their purpose is and nothing more. Moving forward, I want to merge all of these windows together and just give you a nicer editor tool to work with, so you don't have to dig up all these windows. You'll just have a simple traffic system window that will have a lot of editor functionality tools to help you, and they're all in one place. So that's something I want to do moving forward. So let's get back to it. I'll load all the routes. And this one works similar to the last one. We get handle buttons above each of the waypoints in the scene. And what we're going to do is we're just gonna, the buttons say F and T. F is for from, T is for to. And we could see that we have some debug information in the tool as well. So when we press F, we can see which from point we have assigned. If we want to unassign it, we can just click on another from point. But you always want to go in the direction that you're traveling. So we're going to go from this point to this point. We're going to create a connection. So we'll select Connect Route Points. And let's turn our gizmos back on so we can see what just happened. I'll do it again with these points. From to connect route. From to connect route. From to connect route. There we go. Pretty simple. From to connect route. From to connect route, and so on. Okay, so now we've connected all of these outskirt routes together, so the cars will no longer stop at the end of the routes because there is a connection to another route. The perpendicular routes, those cars will still stop because they don't have a connection. So at this point, we've connected our road lanes together so the cars can travel all the way from this section over here, down through this section, up through this section. And this is the basic workflow to create and connect routes. At this point, I'm going to unload. Well, I'll stop play mode because everything's working. I'll unload the routes. I will save the scene again. And now what I want to do is I want to create some connections for these turning lanes. That way the cars can turn off of this lane onto this lane, or they could turn off of this lane onto this lane, or to this lane. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So for this process, I will use the manual workflow. I'll just Control-Alt-R to create a route waypoint. And I will create a short section. So these are basically the intersection route points. So what I'm going to actually do is I'll create an empty object just so we can, again, stay tidy. These will be road intersections. All right. So we have road lanes and road intersections. And these two routes that I created, I will drop into road lanes. And this new route that I'm creating, I'll put in road intersections. And now I'll just manually create this intersection. So for intersections, I typically do 4 points. I don't recommend having fewer than 4 points. 4 points is basically the minimum number of points you should have in any waypoint route. So notice what I did is I just created a basic curve, like a 90-degree curve, and that's about it. So I'll use the route connector window and select from that route endpoint to this intersection route start point, connect routes. So now when the car reaches the end of this route, it'll move to this route, and we'll do the same thing for the end of this intersection route. We'll select from to the start of this intersection route, connect points. Okay, let's unload the routes, just press play, and let's make sure the cars are going to use this curve. And there we go, the car's using the curve, but we can see that he overshot everything, and obviously we have no traffic lights, so the cars are not respecting each other. Let's just take a look at this intersection that we created, and let's make an adjustment. So for turning lane intersections, we really need to reduce the speed limit of cars. Like, a car is not going to come around a 90-degree corner at 30 miles per hour. If they are, the same thing that happened in the simulation will happen. They're going to crash. So we want to tell them there's a speed limit of only 10. So on each of the every waypoint, you could set the speed limit. And it's most important to set on areas where there's a curve, or if you need the car to slow down. Also on these approaching points, the car is always going to turn at this waypoint. So when he gets to this waypoint, we don't want him to travel 25 miles per hour either. Maybe he's going to go 12. And maybe this waypoint, we want to slow him down to 15. And this one up here is 18. And that way, as he's getting closer to the turn, he's slowing down. So from 25 to 18 to 15 to 12 to 10. And then once he gets back on his actual route, he can go back up to the higher speed limit. So let's go ahead and collapse those so we can see again. We'll save the scene, press play. And now when the car takes this turn, he should go slower, and he'll hit all of the waypoints and continue on. And all of these waypoints, if for some reason you need it to be bigger because the settings that you want to use are not working, they just use a box collider as a trigger. So you could increase the scale of the box collider on X or Z. If a car collides with one of these waypoint routes and it's not on that waypoint, it doesn't do anything. So the cars only listen to the waypoints for the routes that they're on. But at this point, we're starting to get to a point where we have a simulation working the way that we need to. Let's go ahead and set up the rest of these turning lane intersections, and then after that we can set up some traffic lights. So I'll press Control-Alt-R to get another route. This time I'm going to go from here to here. I'll load my routes into the route connector, and I will connect them. All right, unload that route. And I'm just connecting them as I go. You can do this all as one specific pass. It's really up to you how you want to do it. So now I'll create a turning lane intersection for this one. So Control-Alt-R, Alt and left click, and load the route from, to, connect them, from, to, connect them, and that's pretty good. Like so we could create multiple routes too. So like when the car gets to this point, we could, let's just do an example. So I'll do Control-Alt-R, and I'll create another route that will lead to this one. So I'll reload the route since I just created a new route to get it in the editor. And we want to select the from handle on this point and the to handle on the new route. Connect those. So now when the car has reached the final waypoint in this lane, it actually has two options. It could take the route that will lead to the lane on the left up here, or it could take the route that will lead to the lane on the right up here. So we'll just finalize that connection to the right. And that just adds more variety and more randomness to the simulation, which I think is cool. And you don't have to set up multiple routes, but if you're just trying to add as much variety as you can, it's definitely something that can help. So set up this turn lane right over here. Load the routes. Now it's starting to get a little busy. Once it gets busy, gotta pay a little bit more attention to what you're doing. Kind of zoom in and make sure you're grabbing the right from and to handles. Okay, so we have the turning lane for this road. We have the right turn lane for this road, the left turn lane for this road. We have a right turn lane for this road. We could use some more turn lanes over here. So I'll unload the routes. Oops. I'm going to redo this route because, actually, so I didn't need to redo it. I needed to fix this route. I need to reverse it. There we go. And I'll align the waypoints on it again. Okay. So I will go back to this route, and there we go. Select from and to handles, connect them, from and to, connect them. Okay, so I think the only thing we need is we need to be able to turn right and left from this route, and we need to be able to turn right from this route, and then we can move on to the intersections. So we'll create another route here, unload, reload, go from, to, connect, from to connect, and let's unload the routes. So the more routes you get in your scene, the more waypoints you have, the more expensive this process is. Just so you're aware, the load route and any of these tools that are drawing handles in the scene view, that updates every frame. So the more you have, the more it's calculating. So if your computer slows down and you just unload the routes, zoom into where you want to go, and then reload the routes. For the most part, you should be okay, but once you start doing a lot of routes, then it can become a little bit more taxing. All right, so here I'll create the new route for the turning lane, and I will unload and reload the routes. So I'm unloading and reloading the routes to get that new route that I just created inside of the editor. And do from here to here. And if for some reason like it's a little busy and you just want to verify exactly which one you're going to, you can actually ping the reference. So I could ping the from route and select it, and we could see that I have this route selected, and it was specifically selecting this point. And then you could ping the to route and make sure that you're going to the right route and to the right point. So I have from to, I'll just go ahead and connect those. Okay, so one last route, intersection turning lane to set up. Let's go back up here, collapse everything, Control R, create a new route. There we go. Load the routes. From to connect, and from to connect. Okay, unload the routes. So now at this point I have all my intersections set up. I will take these new intersections that I made and add them here. And what I will do is I will hold down Alt and left click this little arrow to expand all of the route waypoints that I did, and I'll shift select them and hold Control to deselect the parents. And what this does is it allows me to have all of the new intersection waypoints that I've created selected, and I could quickly just go and set the speed limit to 10 on all of them. So something to note, this is the speed limit that we set for a short 90-degree route. If you have, let me collapse them. If you have something like a route like this, it's not a short 90 degrees, it's a longer 90 degrees, which means your cars can go a little bit faster. So experiment with the waypoint speeds and see what works best for you. But at this point, we have all of our routes connected. We could get rid of the route connector window, save the scene, and test the simulation. So our cars should randomly be taking some of these turns. And they are, and they're crashing in the intersections. So the next thing to do would be to fix them so they don't crash. Okay, so to get that set up, we will select AI Traffic Light Manager. So what this does is it spawns a Traffic Light Manager object in your scene. We could click it, spawns to the center of the scene by default, world center. I will leave this object in the center, but what I will move is the traffic light that it spawned. So I'll take these and bring them near the intersection. So ideally what you would have in your city, so you would have some traffic light models set up like I do here. And in this scene, these are all connected to each other. So this is like, it's not a prefab, it's all baked out. But the best workflow is to create a prefab for your traffic lights and hook up this traffic light manager into a prefab and set up traffic light meshes with these objects pre-assigned so that you can go through this process more quickly without having to align these lights with your meshes every time. But since I don't have a traffic light prefab in the scene, I will just work with the static geometry, and I'll align these lights as best as I could right here. And at this point I have a traffic light for this one. I will duplicate the traffic light, bring that over here. I'm not going to make these perfect, and I will duplicate the traffic light again. So when you're setting these up, you're basically setting up an intersection. So for each light at your intersection, you would duplicate lights on the traffic light manager until you have each light assigned for each lane. And you do need a light for each lane. And we'll get into that in just a moment. Okay, so this intersection has a total of 5 traffic lights. And some of these intersections have turning lanes. So we want to make sure that cars that are turning do not have any cross traffic. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these lights that we have, and we're going to set up sequences for them in the traffic light signal. So the first sequence will be set it up for the first lane we configured. It'll be this one. So we have the first traffic light on the right, and then we have a traffic light to the left of it. So the first two, let's actually number these. So we'll add a 0. So traffic light 0 and 1 are going to be used for these 2 lanes here. What we will do is we're going to, well, before we connect them to the lanes, let's configure the traffic light manager to run in sequence. So for this element 0, which is for this road, we have these 2 traffic lights, 0 and 1. And then we'll add another light cycle. So we'll set another element. It'll be 2. And that'll be for this traffic light, which is number 2. So we will make sure to assign number 2 to element 1's traffic lights. And then we will create another element in the sequence. So the way the traffic lights work is, first it's going to play through element 0's sequence, which is giving these 2 lights a green timer of 15 seconds, a yellow timer of 3 seconds, and a red timer of 3 seconds. Then it's going to wait for a second or 2 and go to the next element in the sequence and follow that timer for the assigned lights. And then it'll go to the next element in the sequence, which is 3 and 4. And once it completes the sequence, it'll loop back to the first one. So what we did was we created a sequence where first this lane is allowed to go. So these 2 lanes are allowed to go and nobody else is, because we don't want traffic from this lane turning into our cars that are going through the intersection. And we don't want traffic from this lane turning into our cars that are going through the intersection. Okay, so now basically we have this entire intersection wired up and we're ready to go. So we have one more intersection in our sequence, let's go ahead and wire that up too. I'll go ahead and save the scene, and I will bring into the scene one more traffic light manager, and I'll kind of do the same thing. I'll take this traffic light and I will just bring it over. So if you actually set up prefabs for the intersections, which is what you should do, like you could take this object if these were not static meshes that are all mesh combined, and you can just create a prefab out of it, and then you would just drop your prefab in the section and move around your lights so they're in the right place. And then you have your sequence all set up, and you have your lights all in place. And if the intersection is using the same shape, which when I build my cities, I've had multiple intersections that shared the same setup with the same sizes and offsets and all of that good stuff. So I will put this light here. Although this intersection is a little different because it has all 4-lane routes, whereas the first one had a 2-lane route in it. So it is a little bit different. We would have had to make an adjustment. But let's go ahead and just move these into position so we could wrap up the tutorial and watch our simulation. So actually with all of the new tools, it's very possible to wire up this entire city within a day if that's something you were interested in, which is basically my goal, and that's what I've been working on. I wanted to make it quick to wire up all of this. When I originally released the asset, none of these editor tools were included, and over time as I was working with the asset from my own project, I realized that I needed to speed up the workflow. So now that all of our lights are set up, let's go ahead and just set up the sequencing. So we'll do the same thing. This route, when this route is active, no other routes will be active. So we have traffic light 0, let's name it. We have 0 and 1. And then this sequence will do 2 and 3. And in this sequence, we will do 4 and 5. So now none of these routes will be able to drive at the same time, which will allow the turning lanes to basically roam free. And if you wanted a light to always be green, you would just not assign the light to the sequence, which would basically just never turn. It would basically never turn to a red light, and you would just manually set that green light on. All right, so let's go ahead and save the scene. And we will load up the last helper tool, which is the signal connector window. And let's go ahead and dock this. And it works very similar to the other tools. We're going to load the lights and the routes from the scene. And here we can see we have a handle above the light. So we're connecting the light. So we're going from the light to the route. And again, you could ping the route and ping the light so you know you're using the right ones. And then connect light to route. And we'll see a new gizmo is drawn so you could see which route the light is connected to. So this is useful for obviously assigning the lights to the route without having to manually do it. What this is doing is it's taking, where is the light that I'm working on? So we could see these two lights have the AI traffic waypoint route. All it's doing is making it so we don't have to manually go in and drag the waypoint route to this AI traffic light script. So it's useful for visually debugging which light is connected to which route, and you could also switch them up. So I could go from and to and replace the connections if I wanted to. Obviously this doesn't make sense, and we don't want to do that. But if you made a mistake, for example, you can easily fix it. So now we'll set these lights. Set these lights. There we go. And just these last two. Okay, and I will go ahead and save the scene. So I could unload the route. Well, actually, let me just reload them just to verify. Yep, I didn't miss any. And that's it. So now, when I press play, all of the traffic should stop at the lights. And let's turn off the gizmos so we could see a little bit more clearly. So we could see these two routes are stopping to let the cross traffic go. You can see they have a red light. Well, this one has a green light, which just turned yellow. So these should be turning green. Actually, yeah, we have a 3 sequence light, so just this one turned green. And we should see some of these cars picking alternate routes. There we go. So now at this point in the tutorial, we're basically done. I'm going to show you how to get a little bit more cleanup functionality so we can have the cars actually stop at the stop line. Notice they're stopping at the point before the stop line. So we just want to adjust those last 2 points so we can get the car to stop exactly where we want. The car will always stop at the second to last point. So knowing that, we can easily come in here and we could turn the gizmos back on. What I did with the demo is I put these lines right up here actually. And then I'll take these two, just move them right up here. And I basically follow that same pattern for each. So I just pick a point on the route that I know is obvious. So basically I'm lining the edge of the arrow up with the stop line, and that's my reference point. And then I'll take that last point and just pull it right up to the front. So I got one at the back end and one at the front end. And that seems to be working in just about every case I've needed it. And we could go ahead and adjust these a little bit too. And these over here. And might as well do the ones at the edge too. And I'm not being super accurate, I'm just kind of dragging them for the most part kind of in place. And yeah, this is going to make them look like they're not stopping too soon anymore. And if, yeah, I think that's okay. So I noticed I had some errors. These are just Gizmo errors. They're completely harmless. Screen position out of view frustrum. Yeah, don't worry about that. It's just saying it couldn't draw a gizmo that's not on screen. So I will clean up that, or I will suppress that error, or I will find a solution for it eventually. My main goal right now is to just kind of develop the best workflow that I can and just improve all of these tools that I've shared to create this little simulation, and just really try to get it to work as good as it can. So I'll bring these up a little bit, move those up, and I think these are the final points. So we could run the simulation again, and all of the cars should be stopping at the actual stop line now. So let's go ahead and scroll up, collapse our scene, and save it, and then press play. So now we'll see this car has a red light, and we can see he stopped again right in the dead center of that point. So now all of the cars are actually stopping where I want them to stop. And our traffic simulation is randomized, and it's looking pretty good. So that car did seem to exceed it a little bit, and that has to do with the timing of when the light actually turned red. So if the light turns red and he actually would have hit that last collider, he still would have went through and traveled through the intersection. But yeah, at this point, that's about it for the tutorial. If you have any feedback or any questions, feel free to ask, and join the discussion forum from Unity. So there's a Unity discussion forum where I'm talking about the progress that I'm making and the updates that I'm working on, and really any announcements related to this asset. But thank you for everybody who's purchased it, and I hope this tutorial helps you get some cool traffic simulations set up in your own project and you have fun using it. I'll see you in one of the next videos. Bye.